Dear all, my name is Karoly Schlosser from the Institute of Management Studies, Goldsmiths University of London, and the Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology and Neuroscience, King's College London. I would like to begin with an apology that I could not join you in the conference in person and I couldn't meet and spend this mindful opportunity and time with you due to unforeseen travel difficulties. I will be talking to you online on this pre-recorded presentation, and do feel free to approach me after if you find it worthwhile. For now, I will be talking to you about an intervention I have co-developed with Juanjo Macias from the University of Malaga, and we'll be introducing you this project we have carried out with high school students prior to their Matura, A-level, or high school final exam period. And prior to that, we have carried out and implemented a mindfulness acceptance-based training for them. This was a randomized control trial in 2017-18, and I would like to share some of the learning outcomes with you. Well, there's an upcoming mental health crisis according to the WHO, who already forecasted this mental health crisis in 2010 when they proposed that, or when they brought our attention to that, the economic burden of mental health will actually double by 2030, so just in 20 years' time, it's likely to the cost of mental health, untreated and treated mental health, will still be somewhere around $8.5 trillion. We are now seeing some of the diagnostics rising. In the depression and anxiety are both rising roughly just in the last few years with 25%. And while suicide rates are unconfirmed, we are definitely finding, and the WHO is definitely finding, that suicide rates seem to increase, particularly among young adults of the age of 24 years old, who are now 24 years old, and who were just about in their final teenage years during COVID and lockdowns. And this is particularly true to people who live in developing countries and coming from less advantaged families. So there are a number of initiatives to overcome the emerging mental health crisis, and one of them is ours. I argue that our mindfulness-based interventions, mindfulness and acceptance-based interventions, are particularly well fit to treat these difficulties because they're transdiagnostic in nature, meaning that they're able to cater for more than one psychopathology, not just depression, but also anxiety, also trauma, and a number of other disorders. Literature has been showing that particularly acceptance and commitment therapy has been useful in treating a number of disorders. It is easy to implement, relatively. It is relatively easy to learn, easy to relate to it. It has got a friendly, humane interface and a framework to human suffering and human life and nature, and has been recommended to be trialed in various school contexts. And some of these studies that I'm introducing you were one of the first ones in 2017. Possibly the first intervention which was brief, that it means that it was only 5 hours long in total. The total exposure time of students was only 5 hours long in the group settings. Very briefly about acceptance and commitment therapy, the simple framework of ACT is called the hexaflex, where we Picture is really small, but on the top you can see mindfulness or present moment awareness is one of the key factors of behavioral change. You also have acceptance, diffusion, self as context, committed action, and personal values as some of the indicators of behavioral adaptivity as well as of psychological flexibility. For those who are knowledgeable about mindfulness, I think there's a large overlap with Buddhist psychology, also secular mindfulness, but perhaps ACT has the additional element of not treating mindfulness as the, let's say, final outcome and the sole purpose, the purpose of experiencing mindfulness as the target. Rather, ACT targets behavioral change and adaptivity under all circumstances. And I think defining psychological flexibility is particularly helpful here, as it indicates really the purpose of the therapy, meaning psychological flexibility was defined as the individual's tendency to change or persistent behavior towards the person's chosen values, despite experiencing significant cognitive difficulties. Of cognitive difficulties, we mean thoughts, difficult emotions, difficult physical sensations. So let's say rumination, anger or fear, and potentially also physical pain. Here I have listed a couple of studies, but the main message I would like to share with you is that ACT as, and also mindfulness, because of the mindfulness acceptance elements and value elements, it's a process-based therapy. Process-based therapies are particularly well suited to be transdiagnostic interventions, and Grissom in 2016 also introduced the term transtherapeutic, which means that where transdiagnostic describes the possibility of improve more than one psychological condition, transtherapeutic means that it's equally capable of treating and improving healthily functioning individuals and improving the important target outcomes, like otherwise mentally healthy people benefit from the training. It improves their performance, academic achievements. In other contexts, we have found that it improves people's leadership capabilities, autonomy even, and so potentially ACT can have significant utility in non-clinical context as well as the clinical psychological context. My research, my PhD research has been focusing on looking at how we can use acceptance and commitment therapy in challenging contexts, in particular, for example, with Olympians, Paralympians preparing for the games, the students, managers, and business individuals, as well as also in the aerospace industry, where I also tested similar brief group-based interventions with the flight controllers of the International Space Station or trainee astronauts, and we are finding that ACT is helpful for them. ACT and mindfulness is helpful for them in dealing with challenges or even difficulties if prepared ahead. So I would like to introduce you more about our school-based study here. Basically, we collected participants from 2 countries, Hungary and Spain, roughly 230 individuals who roughly were equally distributed between the 2 countries. Typically, we had far more females than males, and the trainers had similar types of experiences, although one having been trained in functional analytic psychotherapy more, and myself, I was more trained in mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. So there were these nuances, tiny differences between the two trainings or two approaches of how the trainers were trained throughout their professional development, and we basically merged into this intervention. We created a brief intervention that was delivered across 3 sessions and in total of 5 hours throughout roughly 2 weeks. We collected the data 1 week before, and we also collected throughout that week until the beginning of the training. And we tried to have a post-intervention measurement, which we received fairly good response rates. And the follow-up was the actual graduation day, where we could get hold of almost all, or well, most of the students. This had, this made, the lack of enough responses made the follow-up measure fairly difficult and challenging. So we combined acceptance and commitment therapy with a strong emphasis on mindfulness and functional psychotherapy into the intervention, and tried to kind of pick the most relevant interventions which we thought were capable of a relatively quick improvement in psychological flexibility and mindfulness, and hopefully which could improve mental health in a time where high school students were preparing for possibly the most challenging or greatest challenge of their lives so far, the final exams of their high school. Worthwhile to recall how stressed most of us were at that time, and comparably these students felt possibly quite similar. So we wanted to assess the intervention. We wanted to see how feasible it is to implement, what are the barriers, what are the pitfalls of us delivering this intervention, and whether it can improve mental health, and how does it relate to mindfulness, the facets of mindfulness, and whether it can decrease psychological inflexibility, which is the opposite of psychological flexibility, meaning that people are not able to handle their challenging thoughts, feelings, physical sensations, and hence they are kind of stuck or distracting themselves with various things instead of moving towards their personal goals. In this scenario, the final exam. So our aim was the opposite, to actually increase and give them the psychological skills so they can move closer towards what matters for them, despite experiencing the challenging cognitions. Here you can see our protocol. This is also available on Wiley in Applied Psychology, Health and Wellbeing. It has been published since in 2022, so you can access it for free in the open source journal. Briefly here you can see the description of both randomized controlled trials, the participant numbers, measures we have taken, which mainly were focusing on exam grades, subjective performance, general mental health, stress, psychological well-being, self-esteem, psychological flexibility, and 5 facets of mindfulness. We used an ANCOVA analysis with gender as a covariate, and we could only analyze meaningfully pre- and post-interventions, as the follow-up we didn't have enough participants reporting back at the follow-up at the graduation ceremony day, understandably. Here you can see the outcomes of the Spanish sample, and on the right, I think this is the main learning outcome, improvement in mental health, pre and post intervention. Pre means within 1 week to the beginning, to the first day of the intervention, so it was kind of collected throughout that week, and the post intervention was collected from students on the last day of the intervention. So you can, it's fair enough to point out that this is not an ideal way of data collection, and hence we always suggest people to treat our findings cautiously. Nevertheless, across the two samples, we have found some similarities, including how particularly girls benefited, females, young women benefited from the intervention. So here we measured mental health with the GHQ-12, and you can see how it dropped from roughly somewhere around 24. We actually have it here. Sorry, yeah, so roughly about 20 to about half below 10. The cutting point usually for the GHQ-12 is 12 points for psychological distress. They were well above that. They were at the risk of developing a psychological disorder if the situation persists. So significant improvement in females, also significant improvement in men, but you can see how also men, they didn't have as bad mental health. Young men, they didn't have as bad mental health as women somehow at the time of the data collection. And here you can see some of the other outcomes. We improved the quality of life, psychological flexibility, and this is when the group is combined with the pre-post measure. So we had some meaningful outcome, but the grouping variable in itself, whether people belong to the ACT group or the control group in itself, only brought meaningful results for the mental well-being, and the stress significantly decreased in all groups as a result of the intervention. You can see how the mechanisms of change, they underperformed in certain scenarios. We had a trend, but it's just not good enough to say that it was directly because of the measure, how we measured psychological flexibility. Also, it's worthwhile to mention, or mindfulness. Also, it's worthwhile to point out that since we did this study, a lot fewer people uses the AQ2 because of some recent reliability problems uncovered. Here you can see the Hungarian results. Again, similar outcomes at the end, but women, they started from far worse mental health than men. And in fact, in men, the outcome, young men, the outcome was not very robust, just significant, but somehow within the Hungarian sample, this intervention didn't work well as in the other study. Also, the outcomes are somewhat more conservative. So this was a randomized controlled trial in Spain and Hungary separately. We are planning to run a mediation analysis on the outcomes, so at the baseline, to see how the process variables impacted the outcome variables, how they predicted them. what played a part. But the main take or the key message here is that we found similar outcomes in both countries. Here, this is a tiny bit misleading. These are main overall findings from the overall thesis, not the school study itself. And as it was part of a larger PhD thesis, titles as this one. And here I've collected out some of the main outcomes from the thesis itself. Some key references, and I would appreciate if you would get in touch or say hi, or even send a few critical thoughts about this research. I'm sorry again that I could not be with you today. I really appreciate your attention. Thank you.